I teach in the liberal studies program at NYU, which basically means that I start usually with Gilgamesh and end a couple of years later with the 1950s or something. And I find that a lot of my work actually, I was going to say reacts to things that I've done in class, but I know that I write, a lot of it I've written, a lot of it deals with the books that I've taught since I wrote it, but not before. In any case, so I pick these poems for their educational value. So I want to start with a guy named Daniel Harms, whom I translated, and this is a Russian 1930s poet and writer. So I want to read a translation, and then I'm going to read my own work. Maybe to set the tone for the evening. This is called The Four-Legged Crow by Daniel Harms. There once lived a four-legged crow. Properly speaking, it had 5 legs, but this isn't worth talking about. So once this four-legged crow bought itself some coffee and thought, okay, so I bought coffee, what am I supposed to do with it now? Just then, unfortunately, a fox was running by. The fox saw the crow and shouted, "Hey!" It shouted, "You crow!" And the crow shouted back, "Crow yourself!" And the fox shouted to the crow, "You're a big crow, that's what you are." The crow was so insulted it scattered the coffee. And the fox ran off. And the crow climbed down and went on its 4, to be more precise, 5 legs to its lousy house. February 13th, 1938. What's he remembering here? Come on.
Perch, maybe.
What?
Perch, maybe.
Birch?
Perch.
Perch. No.
Sun's perch.
No.
No, then I'm missing the point. No.
Fox and the Crow? Nobody knows the fable of the Fox and the Crow? It's an Aesop?
No.
Yeah. It's
not in our core.
it's not an hour core either.
Describe the crow had the cheese and was up in the tree.
Right.
And the fox called up to the crow and complimented it.
Okay.
And then the crow had to drop the cheese.
What's he doing with it?
He has it in his beak. The stuff in
Right, but what's Harms doing with that story?
retelling it.
Retelling it how? I mean, how is he changing it? What's there instead of the cheese?
Coffee.
Okay, what does a crow do with cheese?
Eat it?
Right, what does a crow do with coffee?
Get it
Okay.
around.
What else is wrong with this story? Well, I mean, okay, everything. I mean, you were laughing when I was reading it. What's funny about it?
Crow yourself.
It's absurd. It's funny.
Okay. Well, I mean, what makes it absurd?
5 legs.
The 5 legs.
There's 4 legs also.
Okay. Right, because generally crows have 2 legs. But what?
You can't analyze absurd.
Well, look, you can analyze it to the extent that you can say, okay, well, this is wrong, but it's also wrong in a particular interesting way, right? And the interesting way here is that, first of all, you don't know how many legs it has. And second of all, having 5 legs is something kind of weird and shameful, and you don't want to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it now. We're just going to mention it, right? But 4 legs is the norm. Right? I mean, that's how much you're supposed to have if you're a crow, right? I mean, some of the things that are absurd about it is that it sets out all these normal things, which are just totally like stealing the coffee, right? Like, anyway, it's just something you can do with tradition. I just thought that was a good example of what you can do with tradition. So I'm going to read a really old piece that I wrote, I think certainly when I was a grad student, which really doesn't go that far. It's called the Aeneid. My goddess went by the name of Hera. She chased me up and down various seas. I landed on the beach and seduced some woman or another by talking. All the miseries that befell me, the deaths of all my relatives and especially wife, I recounted more or less as they happened. We swore love in a cave, and then it came time to split. The subsequent part of my biography isn't clear. As I recall, my enemy was a large, scrapping turnip. There were fields steeped in blood, excrement, body parts, and short gore. The gorier the tale, the happier the ending. My seed shall inherit the earth. It shall do it by means time-tested and honorable. Perseverance and industry, discipline and deft management. With a measure of satisfaction, I climb into the cold bed of Persephone. So it's a weird monologue by Aeneas. A series of things that I want to read are from this book that I put out maybe, 4 or 5 years ago, called The Life and Opinions of D.J. Spinoza. You probably know who Spinoza was, right? He was a 17th century philosopher. He was a rationalist philosopher, right? Which means that he's somebody that A, thought that the world is rational, and B, thought that using the reason that's encoded in us, we could just sit around and try to reason rationally and figure out all of it, right? Which is by no means obvious on any of its points, right? It's a movement that starts with Descartes, who literally does close the door, sit in his room, stare at the fireplace, and try to think everything from the beginning. What Spinoza brought, as you might know, to the table was the use of geometry as a model, right? And his main book, The Ethics, is written a bit like Euclid. It was written in the style of Euclid's Elements, which is kind of funny. I don't think that this was funny in the 17th century, but it's very funny now, and it's funny now for a number of things, number of reasons. One is you've all taken a look at the elements in your classes, yeah? Yeah? Okay. For until the 19th century, when the beginning of the 19th century, when people were reading the elements and when people were doing geometry, what were they studying? Like, does that make sense? Like, what's geometry to the ancient Greeks? What's geometry to people in the Renaissance? How many of you are in the perspective class? Okay, so what's the function of geometry there?
To understand how to portray visual things and how how the world function in respect to us. And
Okay. Okay. So it is something. It's something that allows you to represent the world, but it allows you to represent the world because it captures a fundamental property of the world, the physical world. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So because until the 19th century, there's only one geometry, right? And the axioms that it's based on to them they're absolute truths, right? They're not these initial assumptions on which you build the system, but they're absolute truths about the way that space is. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So this is why Spinoza uses geometry. Now, looking back at Spinoza, the reason this is funny is there are several reasons. One is the appearance of non-Euclidean geometries in the beginning of the 19th century, right? Like Riemannian geometry, hyperbolic geometry, and so on and so forth, right? Which, what that does, right? They all have slightly different axioms, but what that does is that it changes the very idea of an axiom. Okay? In other words, of a statement like a straight line can be drawn, only one straight line can be drawn between 2 points, which in Euclid is the absolute truth. It's obvious, right? It takes this obvious thing and it makes it not obvious, right? It makes it an assumption, right? There's a geometry in which there's one straight line between 2 points. There's a geometry in which there's an infinity of straight lines. There's a geometry in which there are no straight lines between 2 points. So it stops being the absolute truth, right? And I mean, that's one of the reasons why Spinoza seems, I don't know, outdated? I don't know if that's the word, but some of the assumptions are, right? Also, I mean, there are other things which I'm not going to go into now, but I made him a DJ because DJs spin. Yeah, does that make sense? Okay. So in the first poem, he's talking to Flipper. Flipper is a dolphin from a TV show. I first came to the States when I was 10, and it sounds like mythology, but it's actually true. We found 2 TVs in the street. One had picture, one had sound. We put the one with sound under the one that had the picture, and that's how I learned English. So, by watching Flipper. DJ Spinoza talks to Flipper. He walks around, DJ Spinoza. He looks like a circle from which sticks out a snorkel. He says, "Hey, Flipper, you're next in line for the French throne, for your directions aren't overthrown by the element they swim in. You almost talk, whereas I sit under infinitesimal pieces of glass instead of doing philosophy. If I were a rich man, all day I would titty-titty-dum, for the order of titty-titty-dum repeats the order of things. I know it is so. Look, a cow flies, a fly cows, a rat larks, a lark rats, but a dog dogs, a bug bugs. All sorts of things are happening in the bayou." The line about infinitesimal pieces of glass, Spinoza made a living as a lens polisher. And if you go to his house near Leyden, you can see some of his tools, which is kind of cool. Okay, so the next piece in this series, Spinoza doesn't appear in it, and there's 2 characters named Sortis and Ayal. And I got these names, they're abbreviations from medieval logic manuscripts. Sortis is Socrates, Ayal is animal, right? And they're writing syllogisms in, I don't know, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, Socrates is mortal, and the name is Sortis. which in Latin means lots. This is called the origin of the species. And it comes straight from the experience of teaching writing and critical thinking. Sortes says to Ayal, your axioms contradict each other. You do not know this. Let me show it to you. What is the good? Describe on 2 double-spaced pages in 12-point font. Use only nouns, or rather no words at all. We had enough of those. I cannot see, Ayal makes to say, but instead says ba, mu, bow, wow. I meant to ask you this, but I forgot. Anybody read the Song of Roland? Do you know what the Song of Roland is?
Last year they did, but
Oh, but that was last year.
long forgotten.
Okay. All right.
Different name.
Okay, so the Song of Roland, or Chanson de Roland, is it's a 12th century French poem about Charlemagne. So it takes place in the 8th century, and about his nephew Roland, who is fighting in Spain against the Saracens, against Muslims. And it's funny for a whole number of reasons. One is it actually gives us a model of the way that epic poetry relates to history, because there was a Roland, but he wasn't the nephew of Charlemagne in the way he is in the poem. He wasn't fighting Muslims. He was fighting Basques. He did get killed, but it's not it's like this trifling border skirmish incident from which the poet makes this whole apocalyptic confrontation, clash of civilizations kind of thing. So I have this poem called DJ Spinoza Fights Joseph Bédier. Joseph Bédier was a French medievalist, and you need to know who Roland is, I just told you. What else do you need to know? Oliver, Roland's best friend, who had a horn that Charlemagne gave him. No, Charlemagne gave it to Roland, doesn't matter. Anyway, if attacked, he was supposed to blow this horn to have Charlemagne come to the rescue, but they were kind of embarrassed to ask for help, so they died. It's a really sad story. That is exactly the sound that the horn made. What else? So I wrote this. It was shortly after in Bilbao, in the land of the Basques. Frank Gehry built the Guggenheim. And it made me think how in the Song of Roland, the author, who clearly knew nothing about Islam, has Muslims worship Apollo, and they worship in like this funky temple. I mean, it's all. And this was also the period when the Basque Liberation Army was still active. And everybody else in here is an 8th century philosopher. So there's a name you don't know, 8th century philosopher. DJ Spinoza fights Joseph Bédier. DJ Spinoza runs among thoughts of women. He says to Roland, Sire, there's been a grave error. Those you fought were Basques, fiercely independent admirers of modern art, more European than Goethe. They mined your horse and it blew up when you jumped in the saddle. I should have known they were Basques, Roland says to DJ Spinoza, by the looks of their casques, by the width of their masks, I should have known they were Basques. And when they unfurled those post-colonial soccer scars, then I definitely should have known they were Basques. That's who hit us with rocks without so much as an apology. And to think we gave them electricity and archaeology. Put down that horn, Laurence Olivier. it won't bring back Western civilization. Aoi! At certain random points, the Son of Roland just says Aoi. Nobody knows why. DJ Spinoza says to Roland, Sire, there's been a grave error. You caused them a lot of suffering, your schoolmasters. Alcuin, first ever minister of culture. Crabanus Maurus, lover of number theory. And Friedrichs of Tours with his dumbass Boethian semiotics. France has got the yearning for the learning. Even the emperor keeps letter blocks under his pillow because he dreams of one day waking up literate. Whereas you blow that horn, Laurence Olivier, as a manly dirge for la mission civilisatrice. Roland says to DJ Spinoza, okay, so we fought the wrong people. What do you want me to do? Smash my sword because of it next to where my buddy lies dying, Laurence Olivier, from 153 slash and stab wounds, got by running through a glass pane at the new museum because I mistook it for a mosque dedicated to Mr. Apollo? There's so many wars to come on this continent. Who cares what happened in this one? Olivier, can you hear me? I said, put down that horn. Our deeds will be recorded in minuscule. Aoi. Minuscule is writing from the Carolingian period. It's the kind of calligraphy. Okay, this piece is simple. It's called Dear Owl. Dear Owl, you have big eyes, feathers that stick in all different directions. You wake up, your panties are funny. You hear the sounds words make as they plead for life. That's all that remains of the language of language. O owl among leaves, what is this forest of letters, black light of unintelligible suns? I cannot see who I am, who you are, the difference between good and evil, the end of human desire, how to tell the truth and why. Is this my life? Are you in it? Okay, this is called The Last DJ Spinoza, even though it's not the last. And it's about, some of you know there was a poet named Paul Celan who wrote in German, who was born in the part of Austria-Hungary that became Poland and became Russia, Romania, then Russia, then Ukraine, blah, 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 blah. And in the city of Chernobyl, there's a plaque on his house, which is a really beautiful house. And a friend of mine went to Chernobyl recently and said that the house he was born in is actually the house next to the beautiful house. It's not so beautiful, so they put the plaque on a different house. The last DJ Spinoza. DJ Spinoza is a mighty wrestler. His angel is a book. He dreams, he climbs lines of print. He shall be a father of notions. Oh, DJ Spinoza, dandruff speckles your gabardine. Your wife squints as if threading a needle. Behind your house, your children torture a cat. Nations shall cast off your yoke after murderous convulsions. Your streets shall fill with confusion of faces. Your synagogues shall convert to movie theaters and swimming pools. You shall be replaced with a silicon chip, since you're both so small and so black. There's a motif in there which is from the Old Testament, Jacob, right, who dreams that he's climbing a ladder, he's climbing a staircase, yeah. You shall be a father of nations, which becomes you shall be a father of notions. Spinoza Jacob. When his father lay dying, DJ Spinoza knelt before him in goat skins and pretended he was someone else. Crop dusters buzzed over the cornfields. The knocking of washing machines was heard throughout the land, and the olive trees produced olives with newfound masculine power. Poor father, he was becoming smaller, growing waxier and more inaccessible. His face bore the stamp of chemotherapy. He made efforts to speak, but the words shattered into letters stamped on white plastic blocks in the game of Boggle. The family bent forward to see what he was saying. It was Mamachka, Mamachka. DJ Spinoza unwittingly looked at his own mother, who sat as close to the bed as she could, grasping his father's hand. Okay, more Genesis. This is called Now the Lord said to DJ Spinoza. Now the Lord said to DJ Spinoza, get out of your country. And DJ Spinoza said to the Lord, what country are you talking about, Lord? And the Lord said to DJ Spinoza, good start, for I shall make you lost among nations. And DJ Spinoza said to the Lord, make me lost among nations, Lord, for I'm already lost among myself. And the Lord said to DJ Spinoza, why do you bring up personal problems? Hire a therapist, you who made the schools ring with sick provo. And DJ Spinoza said to the Lord, Lord, is not the set of things in your apprehension infinite? And the Lord said to DJ Spinoza, all things are one thing, but the irrationals are something else. Haven't you heard of the diagonal proof? And DJ Spinoza said to the Lord, so there's another God above you? And the Lord said to DJ Spinoza, read my lips, get out of your country. And DJ Spinoza said to the Lord, but surely just the fact that you're talking in language means you admit of emotions. And the Lord said to DJ Spinoza, you want to be numbered on the tip of my boot? And DJ Spinoza made himself scarce. He lived among the deaf and became as one blind. He lived among the blind and became as one deaf. He saw never the sea. He awoke in a room with four walls. The room moved. He heard the voice of a child, but what it said he ignored. He awoke from a waking. He was aged, wrinkled, hairless, toothless. He remembered nothing of what had happened to him. So you probably remember it's the interaction between God and Abraham, right? When God shows up to Abraham and says, you go, okay? But, you know, here Abraham has 4 legs. Okay, so there's a longer poem in this book called DJ Spinoza Fights the Big Griffin. The Big Griffin is a philosophical monster who is composed of Griffin, right? So half lion, half eagle, half something else. And Begriff. And Begriff, as you know, it means concept in German. So it's a philosophical monster. But this poem is called DJ Spinoza Does Not Fight the Big Griffin. And here DJ Spinoza is interacting with his frenemy MC Squared. Said DJ Spinoza to his friend MC Squared, let us go slay the Big Griffin. Frightful is the Big Griffin and sharp are his claws. He disobeys rules and cares nothing for laws. He's full of effects, but do they have a cause? Let us go slay the Big Griffin. Said MC Squared to his friend DJ Spinoza, why should we add to the misery of this world? Even the wicked have feelings. They shout and they quarrel because they're anal and oral. Problems make them immoral. They're wicked because they have feelings. DJ Spinoza, well, what do you want to do then? You want to watch TV? No. You want to play cards? No. You want to go get a beer? I'm sick of beer. It's so fattening. Let us go slay the Griffin. MC squared. Are you always so restless because you're reckless? Or are you so reckless because you're restless? Can't you even for a moment think of how it'll make you feel in the morning? Tell me you won't be A, whining, B, kvetching, C, moaning. And besides, even the wicked have feelings. So the two friends went off to slay the Griffin. But when they were halfway to the house of most the unlike, DJ Spinoza realized he forgot his sword at home, and you can't slay the Griffin with no sword. They had to return for the sword, but by the time they did it was already too late to do anything. They put slaying the Griffin off for tomorrow and went to sleep extremely content with themselves. Okay, I'm also going to read from the book I'm working on now, which is called The Parrot Who Doesn't Know the Value of Pi. But the parrot first appears in the DJ Spinoza book. And I'm not sure that I can read this poem, but I'm going to try. It's called A Pirate Fit to Opine on Feet. And I wrote it from my niece, who was at that point 12 years old and dancing ballet, and she started dancing on point. Let me see if I can do this. It's a hard piece to read. This is my main hand, says the pirate, and it has made me what I am, the main man on the main. Yes, I'm a radical rapscallion, cruising around in my Spanish galleon, filling the sails with northeasterly trade winds, discharging cannons, and making nice with the maidens. I stand on the fore, I stand on the aft. It's the lifestyle I like, not the golden calf. Anytime you ask me if I want rum, I'll say, thank you, I will have some. Enter MC squared. MC squared. Ahoy, mate, spare some pieces of 8. Get a job, you know, good Nick. Alas, I'm psychologically unable to work. I can identify with that. He offers to give him a coin, but MC squared catches him by the hand and performs jujitsu. Pirate, pirate, tell me the value of pi. 3.14156. I don't know how it ends. Then prepare to die. Ah, spare me, please. Don't orphan my parrot. I'll give you a diamond of 25 carat. Save your carrots for bunnies. They'll clean him and clear him. Give me the proof of the Pythagorean theorem. No! That's the theorem before which I fear him. Please, mister, ask me something I'm good in, like romance or dance. When this leg wasn't wooden, how I pranced without pants. When we pull into port, I rush off to ballet, greeting every plie with a lot. Well then, who in the Bay Area is the famousest dancer on Point? That's easy, it's Son of Roland, go stand. You're free to go. The pirate gets up, groaning and rubbing his police a curtain. And the last poem in this book, it's also kind of like a children's poem that's not a children's poem. When my nephew was like 3.5, he passed this phase that all children go through when they like make up poems to themselves. And I'm walking behind him at the beach, and he's saying, and coincided with like the dinosaur phase and the penis phase. I mean, it was like all three simultaneously. So I'm walking behind him, and he's saying, "Pee-pee-saurus, go and make some pee-pee." I was like, I have to write this. 27 philosophers studied the eclipse. 27 philosophers are made up mostly of lips. 13 philosophers on each side, and the center one flips. Says the center philosopher, "You guys are upside down." The other philosophers say, "No, it's you who's upside down." Pee-pee-saurus comes in and says, "The upside down is upside down." Have you heard about Pee-pee-saurus? He buy a blue balloon. Green is the color of his orange hair. His smile is like a spoon. Yup, when the Pee-pee-saurus comes, all the philosophers swoon. Says the green philosopher to the orange philosopher, if N is O, then O is P and P is Q. Says the orange philosopher to the lilac philosopher, I follow you. Says the lilac philosopher to the vermilion philosopher, what is the color of white? Says the vermilion philosopher to the egg yolk yellow philosopher, have you heard about the Pipisaurus? It's the end of the world. Everybody's expecting the Pipisaurus. Pipisaurus comes in and says, I'm not late, am I? No, says everybody. Pipisaurus, Pipisaurus, go and make some pee-pee. Pipisaurus, Pipisaurus, go and make some pee-pee. Make some pee-pee, Pipisaurus. Pee-pee is yippee. Pipisaurus, Pipisaurus, what you're doing uptown? Pipisaurus, Pipisaurus, you chasing our women around. Don't you worry. Forget your Saurus. Pipisaurus is passing by. Yeah, Pipisaurus. Hey, Pipisaurus, where did you get that hat? Hey, Pipisaurus, are you allergic to the cat? Hey, Pipisaurus, you dynamic dude. Today in a PP positive mood. You're looking like Demoiselle d'Avignon good. Oh, Pipisaurus, philosophers say, would you mind if we shouted hooray as you pass one way infinite like a ray? Très chic, très shock, très. Pipisaurus, yay, not Pipisaurus. Pipisaurus, what's your reply? Pipisaurus, he ain't to ply, no word can apply. Pipisaurus, know why, he's just, yeah, passing by. Okay, so I'm going to read a few poems from The Parrot Who Doesn't Know the Value of Pi. Which is a piece where I work a bit more on characterization, like really trying to develop them into separate beings, the pirate and the parrot. How many pirates does it take to calculate the value of pi? One won't. The pirate who doesn't know the value of pi sails alone far from port. He's broody, he's moody, he's apprehensive that the ship he sails will turn into a sieve, that a sea monster will steal his mast, that there'll be no milk for his cereal, there always was in the past. Around him moves a sinusitis of sine curves. What is this, some barmy screensaver? Complains the irate pirate. Are you starting? Curmudgeon, cries the parrot, right on his shoulder next to the pearl earring. Are you starting again, says the pirate with a pearl earring. But the parrot suddenly pretends he's hard of hearing. State the difference between the rules for being a pirate and the rules for being a parrot. How about the pirate rates, an intransitive verb meaning to voice angry reprimands, but the parrot prates, an intransitive verb meaning to say things other than those one understands. The pirate rates himself highly, but the parrot ignores him almost entirely. Are those really rules? They're more like descriptions. Okay. How about the parrot poops on the pirate, but the pirate does not poop on the parrot? Now that's more like it. Can we have additional propaganda? The parrot is silent as if someone sat on the sable. The pirate tries hard to appear undismayable. The parrot shifts from paw to paw in Russian lapa. The pirate has his pants 3/4 of the way down his butt like a plumber who, after having too many at supper, starts throwing up signs like a hip-hopper. The pirate stamped a smile over his standard. It writes his jolly Roger Jowlier. The parrot can distinguish all from some, which effectively bans him from coming from Alabama with a bandage on his knee, Alabama bounds in bananas, to do stand-up at the Ibn Battuta Cultural Center and Alfresco Dining Experience in Somalia. The pirate likes to pose on the aft, or is it the poop crying, ahoy mateys, while wearing nothing but a flowery garland. The parrot blanches when he does that, though he can't decide whether it's more for the pirate's being naked or his own being shown bland. The pirate identifies more with Mary Ann than with Ginger in Gilligan's Island. The Parrot's favorite movie is Yentl, starring Barbara Streisand. The history of the pirate who does not know the value of pi and his parrot goes way back to the ancient Greeks and possibly even backer. Homer did not insert it into the Odyssey because he wished to avoid epic retardation. Hesiod kept it out of works and days because he couldn't decide which it was more, works or days. It was Psittacus that composed the definitive version in Elegia Quadrupeds. However, his dog ate it. Psittacus succeeded in making his dog throw up, but unfortunately proved unable to read the contents. The high point of my poetic life, manger, cried Psittacus and rushed off to the agora, but got lost on the way because he had rhapsodic memory disorder, which is why he couldn't reconstruct the elegy in his head. When Psittacus got to the agora, he felt perplexed Sphinxian. Which of these columns is Doric, which is Ironic, and which is Corinthian? It was in order to beat his head against the column of the Ironic order in frustration. Let us return to the pirate and his biota. This is the story of the pirate and his parrot, not unlike the ballad of Bonnie and Clyde, who, however, were a little more desperate and disparate. On the day of their meeting, the pirate was not yet a pirate. Although always aspiring to become one when an adult, he had amassed a vast private collection of pirate arms, yatagans, grappling hooks, blunderbusses, Malaysian krises, 358 total. The parrot was already a parrot. How they met, closed-circuit cameras agree. In the dark pet store on a dank day, both nose and beak were full of mucus. Not a little nervously, the two confided in each other how much they loved to play with boorishly booming bazookas. They assaulted tourists from Bali all the way to the Venice Biennale, then took a trip down to California, where they worked as instructors of calisthenics, calibration, and calligraphy, cooked cauliflowers, then reallocated themselves to crime, and finally, with the proceeds, bought themselves a galleon in case they should come across a large store of gold bullion. It was then they took to the sea and took up piracy. They raided packet boats, pedal boats, and boats at once packet and pedal, palanders, pirogues, pontoons and gondolas made of metal, dhows, dinghies, bidarkas, catamarans and clippers, felucas, garukas, tankers, bathtubs and bathroom slippers. But whether on the wavy wave or on the coconut-strewn shore, they never did forget that old dark and dank pet store, not even when filling their coffers or beheading recently met coffers. They worked hard, became successful and wealthy. They bought art and a split-level house in New Jersey, although they were never in it for the cash, but because the criminal form of life is such a blast. What a beautiful song, said the pirate. I wish I knew all the ship names in it. Shh, said the parrot. We'll look them up later. Later when? Asked the pirate. When this book is over, said the parrot. The pirate fell into deep thought. Will we exist when this book is over? He suddenly asked. If it's a good book, said the parrot. Okay, this is an interview with an actual Somali pirate that I got from the BBC, and I only changed 2 words and put in line breaks. It's for real. My ambition is to get a lot of money so that I can lead a better life. Now I have 2 lorries, a luxury car, and have started my own business in town. I only want one more chance in piracy to increase my cash assets. Then I will get married and give up. Piracy is not just easy money. It has many risks and difficulties. Sometimes you spend months in the sea to hunt a ship and miss. Sometimes when we're going to hijack a ship, we face rough winds, and some of us get sick and some die. Sometimes you fail in capturing, and sometimes you come under threat by foreign navies. All we do is venture. Our work is seen by many in the coastal villages as an act of resistance, and we're viewed as heroes. A lot of people in coastal villages aspire to be us. And I'm going to read just a few, three more pieces from the second half of the book, where they get shipwrecked and they wind up on a deserted island. And then they just bicker for the rest of the book. As you notice, I don't know how to sing at all. This is the tale of castaways who don't know the value of pi. They memorized it to several decimal places, yet how it goes on they can't say. Is this a 7 or a 5, an 8 or 22? What happens in position and what happens after it, like when n yields to n plus 1 and then n plus 1 to n plus 2. The rain did rain and sideways blow. The pirate ship was tossed on billows towards stars that wouldn't glow in some kind of vertical do-si-do. Above them H2O, and lo, there was H2O below. And the parrot parlayed to the pirate, "Oh no, we are entirely lost. Put the futtock shrouds into the lubber's hole. Drop the main topmast jackstays. Yarely, fall toot." It was the pirate that exclaimed aloud, "Slack the bow ends." "What's the use?" said the parrot. "We're lost." "Set the top gallants onto the the forecastle." That was again the pirate. "Tush, phooey," said the parrot. "You can't just abandon all hope, parrot," explained the pirate. "Haven't you heard of the experiment when they put 2 frogs into 2 glasses of milk, and one gave up and drowned, but the other kept swimming until the milk turned into yogurt? Also, Descartes says if you're lost, you just need to pick a direction and stick to it. You'll end up somewhere." "But what if you can't end up there in a finite number of steps?" "Because I don't do transcendental magnitudes," complained the parrot. "I'm only a bird." "Nonetheless," said the pirate, who doesn't know the value of pi, "go toot! Watch the flying jibs!" These are names of actual sails. I was working with a picture dictionary. Their ship ran aground on the shore of a deserted desert isle with a pirate who doesn't know the value of pi and a parrot too, cracking a relieved smile. There once was a pirate and a parrot, or rather there once were a pirate and a parrot who after a shipwreck ended up on a deserted island. "This island is deserted," said the pirate. "No, it's not," said the parrot. "Do you know something I don't?" said the pirate. "It can't be deserted if we're on it," said the parrot. "No, ain't, utterly, forget about it, rejection, ar, ga ga ga, ar, ridiculous," poof poofed the pirate. So then in the book they get into lots and lots of arguments, and then after they get really sick of each other, they start thinking about, like, if there actually were natives on this island, could we make ourselves understood to the natives, and would we understand the natives, and what would we say to them? But there aren't any. Pirate: "Do you think this island has any indigenous people on it?" Parrot: "If it does, we won't understand them or they us. Indigenous people never have any common sense." Pirate: "Why never? Have you met all of them?" "I don't have to meet all of them. That's what logic is for. If they had common sense, they would emigrate. If they emigrated, they would no longer be indigenous people. QED. But Parrot, why should they immigrate? But Parrot, why shouldn't they emigrate? Should they sit here all their lives? Don't they deserve a second chance? Why do you take it upon yourself to speak for indigenous people? If I don't speak for them, who will? Somebody has to speak for them if they don't have any common sense. Most of what they know is numb terror under some hedge of chokecherry or viburnum, which they cannot express. Poor indigenous people. Poor indigenous people. Poor, unfortunate, indigent, endogamous, ingenuous. Poor, genuine people, my Pope's nose. What if they show up and ask to see our visas? Well, we don't have any. We don't even possess passports. That's what troubles me, Pirate. Suppose we get deported. We must persuade the indignant people that in our culture, it's not proper to ask pirates and parrots for passports. How can you persuade anyone of anything if they don't have any common sense? But are you sure they don't have any common sense? I mean, you proved it, but are you sure? Let me read you something. Again, this is an actual piece that the Parrot reads from a 19th century ethnography. I just changed one name. Unlike their peers, the Tonga Islanders do possess native numerals up to 1,000. Not content even with this, the French poet Le Comte de Lille pressed them further and obtained numerals up to 10 to the 12th. However, his data was proven upon publication to be partly nonsense words and partly indelicate expressions, so that the supposed series of high numerals forms at once a modest lexicon of Tongan indecency and a warning as to the probable results of taking down unverified answers from savages. Pirate, I can see why you're nervous. Indigenous people are really hard to talk to. Okay, so this is the last piece. Thank you very much for listening. You've been very hardy campers. Hello, nice weather we're having, says the parrot. How do the grammatical structures of your language affect your experience of it? Are you practicing, says the parrot from the bushes. Are you spying on me, says the parrot outside the bushes. That won't work, says the pirate climbing out of the bushes. Why? Their language might lack the expression for the grammatical structures of your language, explains the pirate. In which case they would have no idea of what you're talking about. What do you think, I was born yesterday? They wouldn't understand a word if I used words. I'm going to translate everything into signs and gestures. The parrot, how would you render the phrase the grammatical structures of your language in signs and gestures? The parrot. The pirate. No, that's not entirely clear. Have you thought of this? Parrot. Structures, not strictures, structures. I am trying to do structures. Less force. Look at me, try this. Pirate. That might do. Should we act it out? I'll be the native, you be the alien. We go to the opposite ends of the island, we turn around, we walk towards each other, we communicate. They go to the opposite ends of the island, turn around, and walk towards each other. Hello, nice weather we're having, signs the parrot. How do the grammatical structures of your language affect your experience of it? Because my verbs have no tenses, signs the pirate. It's all weather for me all the time, baby. How interesting, signs the parrot. I see not all your sentences are copulative. Don't use that gesture, says the pirate. They might get the wrong idea. Thank you. That's it. If there are any questions, I'm willing to entertain them.
Where can I buy your book?
Yes, sure. Where? on the internet. In Berlin, who has it? St. George's, I think, has it. They might be sold out. Motto Books definitely has it. Do you know Motto Books? It's a really great, it's a great art book store. Motto Books is, it's in East Kreuzberg. It's a superstore. Yeah, yeah.
What is the one word that you changed?
I put in acts of resistance. I forgot what the original said, but it was. I don't remember what the original said, but it was something. It was something just too tautological. Something. I forget. A work is, or maybe as justified or something. But I think that interview, it's so interesting because, first of all, it's in the language of venture capitalism. And in Somali piracy, the villages actually do invest. It's very similar to piracy in like the late 16th century in England, in that there are many small private investors, and there's like a stock exchange, and people get proceeds. So it's just curious to read that language. And it's very funny because when you read to an older audience, the line, "I will get married and give up," everybody just cracks up and starts laughing. But here, that didn't go over too well. Just an observation. Anything else? No?
What was the title of the last one?
Of this, it's called "The Parrot Who Doesn't Know the Value of Life."
Specifically the last poem.
The poems here don't have titles in this book. It's done as a single series, and that one isn't published yet. I'm performing it with 2 other people on December 7th at the Akademie der Künste. This grant I'm on, there's a big festival. Anyway. All right, thanks.
You mentioned Carnes. What other people influenced you? What other writers you like?
Well, I've been working for years and years on people in his circle. So the last book I did was Alexander Vidensky, who's Harms's closest friend.
Were you writing about him, or you're translating him into English? Or?
I'm translating it into English, but it's a translation with an introduction, with commentary, with blah blah blah. So it's not just a translation. And then I don't know. I spent a lot of time, especially in grad school, reading English 16th and 17th century stuff. And now working on the pirate book, I read a lot of pirate narratives from the 17th century and exploration narratives, which are really, 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 really interesting. I mean, they make for fabulous reading. And so the last poem, for example, even the phrase signs and gestures, I stole from a narrative, weirdly, of the British landing, I guess they're English back then and not British, of the English landing for the first time on the North Sea coast of Russia. And they're using the exact same language as they use for landing in America. And so they meet local fishermen and they talk with them in signs and gestures. And you always you read all these narratives, and the narrative of landing, it's always you land, and then the people come out, and you make yourself understood with your fingers, and I mean,
How about common sense? Anything about common sense in those transcripts?
well, that's I don't know. Do you guys read Columbus's diary? Columbus's diary is really interesting because you can see that there's no such thing as common sense. Because if there were such a thing as common sense, then everyone would have it, and Columbus doesn't have it. And generally, if you really read stuff from that period, if you read it like for the first time, it's unspeakably strange. I mean, in Columbus's case, it's because there are two main strands of thought about how the people that he meets are happy and safe and warm and fuzzy and blah 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 blah, and the second strain of thought is how you can exploit them, right? And how you can turn them, how you can put them to work, how you can Christianize them, how you can put them into our clothes. So it's really weird. But that's on like the general level, but the details, the combination of details, the things that they notice, and the things that they put next to each other, are very, very interesting. I mean, there's a huge, huge library. Pirate books, there are a bunch of pirate biographies from the 17th century. They sold in the 18th century. They sold incredibly well. Defoe wrote a whole bunch. There was real money in this, including some really crazy ones. Like there's one that Defoe wrote that might be actually just entirely made up, about this French aristocrat and a runaway renegade Catholic priest who become liberation pirates. They talk to each other in this whole 18th century discourse, even though it's only the discourse is basically being invented at the moment. They attack slave ships, they liberate slaves, and they establish this Enlightenment community of pirates on Madagascar. And there's no other evidence for it apart from this. So it's a really, really interesting literature. And then the other stuff that I'm reading is stuff about parrots, which, if you look at classical philosophy, parrot is always like it's somebody who parrots, who doesn't understand what they're saying, who just repeats. But if you look at animal intelligence experiments with parrots, that's simply not true. They understand a lot of the stuff that they say. I mean, not all of it, but at least some of it. And if you also look at other traditions, like the Islamic tradition, the Persian tradition, there's a very elaborate tradition of talking about parrots, where parrots function as storytellers, where parrots even become kind of the figure for the reciter of the Quran. So it's a totally different attitude towards parrots.